The laughter should have rolled past me. That was how these dinners always worked. My father made a joke. Everyone laughed just loudly enough to stay on his good side, and I swallowed whatever reaction tried to rise in my throat. But that night, something inside me was already too exhausted to bend. I set my fork down carefully. Interesting, I said quietly. Because those real decisions you mentioned almost cost the company $3 million today. The room shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough. My older brother Daniel stopped smiling. My mother's eyes flickered toward my father like she was checking weather before a storm. Even my youngest cousin straightened in his chair. My father finally looked at me directly. You trying to embarrass me at my own table? No, I replied. I'm trying to understand why fixing disasters doesn't count as real work when I'm the one fixing disasters caused by everyone else. Silence. The kind that makes silverware sound loud. Daniel laughed first. Low and sharp. You always do this. Do what? Act like you're carrying the entire company. I stared at him for a second. Then I actually smiled. You disappeared for 6 weeks last quarter because you forgot to renew a licensing contract and blamed it on legal. His face tightened. You rerouted inventory through the wrong port in February. I continued calmly. You cost us 2 clients in March because you promised delivery dates we couldn't meet. And last week you approved overtime cuts during peak shipping season. Nobody moved. I looked back at my father. And who handled all of it afterward? My father's jaw flexed once. You're out of line. No, I said. I'm finally speaking. For years, I had convinced myself silence was maturity. When Daniel forgot meetings, I covered them. When suppliers threatened lawsuits, I negotiated extensions. When employees quit because management treated them like disposable parts, I stayed late rebuilding schedules so operations wouldn't collapse the next morning. And every single time something went right, my father praised Daniel for leadership. If something went wrong, he called me reliable. Reliable. Not brilliant. Not essential. Reliable. Like duct tape on a leaking pipe. Useful but ugly. My mother cleared her throat softly. This isn't the place for business discussions. That's funny, I said before I could stop myself. Business gets discussed here every Sunday. I'm just usually not allowed to speak during it. My father put his knife down slowly. You think you deserve more credit? I laughed under my breath. No. I think I deserve honesty. He leaned back in his chair. Eyes cold now. You want honesty? Fine. Daniel understands vision. He understands people. Leadership matters. More than cleaning up spreadsheets. There it was. The thing he had believed my entire life. Daniel was charisma. I was maintenance. The backup son. The son you called when things broke. I looked around the table. At the cousins pretending not to listen. At my aunt carefully avoiding eye contact. At my mother sitting perfectly still like movement itself might trigger something worse. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and placed my phone on the table. I wasn't planning to do this tonight, I said. But maybe everyone should hear the call from this afternoon. My father's expression changed instantly. Just slightly. But enough. You recorded a private call? Yes. You had no right. I had every right. After you told the board the warehouse crisis was Daniel's recovery strategy. Daniel's face went pale. Because he knew. He knew exactly which call I meant. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the dining room. If he can keep fixing things quietly, let him. Daniel is the face of the company. Nobody promotes the mechanic over the driver. Nobody breathed. The recording continued. Besides, he's loyal. He won't leave. I stopped the audio there. The silence afterward felt endless. My cousin looked horrified. My aunt stared openly at my father now. Daniel looked furious, but not shocked. That part hurt most. He already knew. He had always known. My father folded his napkin carefully beside his plate. You recorded one conversation out of context and think that means something? No, I answered. Years of this means something. I stood up from the table. For a second, nobody spoke. Then my mother whispered my name. Not as a warning. As a plea. I'm not taking a day off. I met his eyes. I'm resigning. The room exploded. Daniel stood immediately. Oh, come on. Stop being dramatic. Dramatic? I laughed once. You think working 18-hour days for someone who openly admits they'll never value you is dramatic. You're emotional right now. No, I said quietly. I'm clear right now. My father's voice hardened. You walk out that door. Don't expect to walk back in. That sentence should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something strange. Relief. Because for the first time in years, the prison finally sounded like a prison. I picked up my coat. My mother stood halfway from her chair. Please don't do this tonight. I looked at her gently. You know what's sad? Her eyes filled immediately because she already knew. You never stopped him. I left before anyone could answer. Outside, the cold air hit like water. My phone buzzed before I even reached my car. Daniel. Then my father. Then my mother. I ignored all of them. For 10 straight years, my life had been alarms, emergencies, and invisible labor. I had forgotten what silence sounded like. That night, I drove for almost 2 hours before stopping at a gas station outside the city. And for the first time in my adult life, nobody needed anything from me. No supplier. No crisis. No family disaster. Just darkness, highway lights, and the sound of my own breathing. I should have felt terrified. Instead, I sat there in the parked car and realized something horrifying. I looked at her and almost sat back down. Almost, because part of me still wanted what I had wanted since childhood. One sentence, one moment, one sign that my father actually saw me. But people rarely become different just because you finally become tired. I won't be in tomorrow, I said. My father scoffed. You think taking a day off is some kind of threat? I had built my entire identity around being useful to people who would never love me properly. Not because I was weak, because usefulness was the only affection my father ever rewarded. When I was 12, Daniel broke a neighbor's window with a baseball. My father laughed and called him spirited. When I got perfect grades, he nodded once and asked why I lost 2 points in chemistry. When I was 16, I stayed awake 3 nights helping my mother organize invoices after one of the accountants quit unexpectedly. She cried and hugged me afterward. My father looked at the finished stacks and said, "Good. At least one of my sons understands responsibility." At the time, I thought it was praise. Years later, I understood. Responsibility was the role he assigned me, so nobody else had to carry it. And I accepted it. Again, until I became invisible underneath it. My phone buzzed once more. This time it was a message from someone unexpected. My chief operations manager. Technically one of the few people at the company who actually knew how much work I did. The text was short. I heard, then another. Call me before you make final decisions. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. Already made it. 3 dots appeared instantly. Then disappeared. Then came the final message. Good. I frowned. Good? That was all. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. I answered. What? Maya didn't bother with greetings. You finally left. You sound excited. I am. I leaned back in the driver's seat. That makes 1 person. No, she said. You have no idea how many people at that company were waiting for this. I laughed tiredly. Waiting for me to quit. Waiting for you to realize you're the one keeping the place alive. I rubbed